Here we have a question. This is exercise number 3 for chapter 8. We're going to first determine the total amount of payroll checks and purchase requisitions processed per year by the company for each division. So we're going to add those up, and it says in divisional income statements prepared by Mills Corporation or Construction Company, payroll department costs are charged back to the user divisions on the basis of the number of checks, and the purchasing department costs are charged back on the basis of the number of purchase requisitions. Payroll department had expenses of $40,480. The purchasing department had expenses of $17,690 for the year. Following annual data for the residential, commercial, and government contract divisions are obtained from the corporate records. We have our sales for each division, the number of checks, weekly payroll checks, 220 for the residential, and there's 52 weeks. So we'll multiply the 220 times 52 for residential, and the monthly payroll we have 32 checks, so it'll be 12 times 32. We'll add those together, and that will give us our various checks. So let's go ahead and make some of those calculations. So I'm going to take the 220 times 52. So I take the example, I'll just write one example here. 220 times 52, and that equals 11,440. So that's going to be 11,440 here. I can also take my monthly payroll, that's 32, and that's by monthly, so I'll multiply by 12. So 32 times 12 equals 384. So I'll have 384 monthly payroll. So the total number of payroll checks, I can add those together. 11,440 plus 384, that equals 11,824 total checks for residential. Let's go ahead and I'll work the commercial too. I'm not going to draw it out. I'll just use my calculator. For the commercial, I have 70 weekly checks times 52 weeks. That's 3,640. And I have 43 monthly checks. 43 times 12 is 516. If I add those together, 516 plus 34 or 3640, my total payroll checks for that division will be 4156. For the government contract, we have 75. So 75 times 52 weeks is 3,900. And we have 30 monthly checks. So 30 monthly checks, 30 times 12 equals 360. Add the 360 plus the 3,900. That's 4,260. So now we have the number of checks that we are going to be processing. In part B, and I guess they ask us for the grand total of all the checks, and so we can take the 11,824 plus 4,156 plus 4,260. So that's 20,240. And the reason we'll need that number is that's the total number of checks. We have to take the total payroll cost divided by the total number of checks, and then we know what the cost per check is. So we go down to part B, and it says using the activity-based information in A, determine the annual amount of payroll and purchasing costs charged back to the residential, commercial, and government contract divisions for the payroll and purchasing services. If required, round it to 2 decimal places. So we're going to take the total cost of our payroll, and that was $40,480. So I'll take the $40,480. I'm going to divide that by the total number of checks, and that's 20,240. Make simple division here. 40480 divided by 20240, and then of course that looks like it's just going to be 2. Yes. Equals $2 per check. Now the requisition cost, we have to figure out the total number of requisitions. Let me clean this up a little bit. Our total requisitions will be the 2,600 plus 1,800 plus 1,700. So we'll add those together. $6,100 requisitions, and our requisition purchasing department was $17,690. So $17,690. We'll divide that by the 6,100. That looks like 2.9 per requisition, or $2.90 per requisition. With that known, we can now make our service department allocations. We'll take $2 per paycheck for the payroll department. So our total payroll checks for the residential, 11,824 times $2 is 23,648. And for the purchasing department, we used 2,600 times 290. So 2,600 times 2.9 is 7,540. So for the residential, the total amount that's going to be charged to them for both departments will be the 23,648 plus the 7,440, $31,188 would be charged to the residential. We'd go through the same process for commercial, where we multiply the $2 per check times the total number of checks, the $2.90 for the requisition, times the number of requisitions for the commercial department, add those together. Same thing with a government contract, and we'll add these totals up, and they should equal the total amount of our costs.